I got the little. It's really funny, we have one of these and we're only minutes together. I don't know, like the big girl there, right? Well, no, it used to be like, if you're tall. I see that. Yeah. It was kind of, I should have been bringing the chairs down for people to be on the ground. And then for whatever reason. On the chair, I would just sit there. I don't think it's able to do that. Health insurance? Carbon casualty. Or change. Okay.
Oh, zero.
I didn't know. I'm trying to. I see. Good afternoon. I'd like to call our meeting for February 13th, 2023 Children's Trust, County, and holding the order. Again, the secretary can call part to call the roll, please, and sure you have it on.
Harrison,
Here.
member Andrew. Member Cornell, here. Member Hart,
Here.
member Ferrera, here. Member Peterson, here. Member Snyder,
Here.
member Conley,
Here.
member Bartlett.
Here. In fact, we have an in-person phone. Our executive director, Ms. Tyler, is joining us by Zoom. Can you hear us? Good.
I can, yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, we'll take a motion now to approve our agenda and the consent agenda. Second. Madam Chair, I would like, not because I had any question about its accuracy, but it's a question about the format, looking at the programmatic award and expense report, whether anyone has to pull it or if we can, just deal with it at some point. Still just about it. So since I have a question also about that, let's pull that item. I'm going to do as a small thing. Let's pull it and we can, we'll insert it before the year with police, but it's very. Okay, thank you. Anyone else have anything on the agenda that they'd like to comment or not? Right, and then I mean, no more discussion on the favor. Opposers. Passes. So, Dr. Lamar, I'll let you go ahead and address that programmatic board and discuss now. Yeah, as I was looking at some of the items, I noticed that there were a number of budgeted items that had nothing expense to them. So my question is why? What does that mean? That they not invoiced us or what is in expense the same as encumbered? And then the other is really a request that it would be helpful to see the percent of it expensed against the place we are in the year. So right now we're basically 3-4 months into our fiscal year. What percent should we be looking at? This makes it easier to look and see whether things are expense consistent with the fiscal year or there's some variation from that. But I did wonder about a lot of them with like a fair amount of funding allocated and that expense. Right, I'm gonna let our
since the printing of the report, at least $500,000 has been expensed, approved and paid. Additionally, we are in the process of reviewing new invoice spreadsheets that are being sent to the providers. So a lot of them have not yet processed their invoice or sent us their invoices because they're waiting for the new updated invoice.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. So my question was actually not on board. My question was on the memo that's sent to the Board of County Commissioners. And that is behind. There was a situation with the dates that I had on. Market. It has receipts, expenditures. And sent to the chair of the commission. It's behind tab 3. It's page 25, 24 and 25. And I think I know the answer, but I'm just gonna ask you anyway. On page 24, it says first report financial reports of fiscal year 23. It's got this quarter and some. And then on the next page, it says financial report. I think it was 12/31/22. And I think my question is kind of similar to what Maggie's was, is the expenditures, it's showing there a total of $395,000. And that is through December of 2022, right? In the there. And you just haven't reflected, Ms. Sanchez and I had a conversation with him in the review about, we're gonna change the program, the financial reports will come in arrears. So that she can have time to do more reconciliation and more checking of them to make sure that they are accurate as because in the past, we've gotten them like, if we were meeting today, it would be like January 31st, and it just, she didn't have enough time, she said. So I've had that conversation with her, but I was just wondering if what is here now, if that is through December. Like,
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Thank you, that's my question. So, thank you, Ms. Sanchez. So, we approved the agenda and jump right into the answering, board member Labarge and my question, and I actually scheduled right now a couple of comments. So right now, we provide space at the beginning of our meetings to have, some input from, folks who are in attendance for. And would like to address the board, in fact, a few minutes to this desk, you come to the podium, and state your name, and our clerk will be our timekeeper. Okay, is there anyone who has any general public input, citizen input that's not related to an agenda item?
Good afternoon, I'm Curtis Pearson, Principal of Hearing and Sharing Learning School. I just come to you today to say that we have an after-school program that's been running since 2008. We are our own self-entity, as many of the people who are around the stable are able to attest to. We are able to contract because we have our own 501c3. We are our own corporation for our after-school program. We contract with school readiness, which is ELC. We contract with city government. We contract with Alachua County government. We contract with a lot of other entities. We are also one of the only programs in the state of Florida that have accreditation by Cognitive, the Rural Ride accreditation. However, we're not able to contract with Children's Trust because there's some clause or somewhere in there that says that you cannot contract with the school board. I have two people here that can attest that we are self-funded. We're not part of the school board in any entity when it's able to do our own contracts. So I ask that you look at this again for future reference when it's time for us to contract for after-school programs. We have 175 students over in East Gainesville. We're able to serve the Sugar Hill area, Spring Hill area, Lincoln Estates, and a lot of other areas if we had funding that can assist with these kids. Out of the 175 we have now, we have 90% of those kids are free or reduced lunch. We have an after-school program that does strings, violin, cello, performing arts, dance, and I'm sure most of the people in this room have seen what these kids are able to do for us, and they're a great representation of not only Gainesville, but the state of Florida when they go off and do what they do. So I implore you again to look at whatever this pause is that makes caring and sharing different than every other place we're able to contract since we've been in our existence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Swain, Secretary, our legal representative, one of the two waited for that.
They're a charter school. And because they're a charter school, they can't receive funds.
So Mr. Peterson, it's not like the local board made that distinction, that is in the state statute. That schools and school districts can receive funding directly from the trust. So it's not us. That's what the state statute that establishes the Children's Services Council. And I could like, I don't know the chapter, 119, 125.
It's 125, 901.
So I know I get it wrong, that's why I want to stay with that. Chapter 125, so it's not us, but I appreciate the work that Karen and Sharon does, and you guys do it really well. And but it is that state statute, right?
So we know that the after-school is a completely separate program, self-standing.
Separate corporate entity?
Well, it's a subsidiary of the first.
But is it a separate 501? That's it. That would be the way to spin it off as a separate 501.
Gotcha.
Right, Mr. Swain? Is there anyone else?
Good afternoon. So I'm guessing that the floor is still open for general.
This is participant.
Yes, yes, ma'am. I'm going to take just 1 minute to provide you with a handout of my very brief presentation. My name is Connie Karen Swan, and I'm the CEO and founder of Genesis Family Enrichment Center. We are a nonprofit 501c organization, and we are committed to strengthening families and transforming communities using trauma-informed, evidence-based, attachment-centered parenting. And I wanted to come and, number one, introduce myself to you all. We have been in Gainesville for approximately 5 years, probably a little bit more. And I don't know that there's an understanding yet of what we do, so I wanted to introduce myself. Secondly, I wanted to leave you all with a few points to ponder, and that's what you have in front of you. Our parenting programs are very unique. I think in the state of Florida and around the world, we find parenting is offered to families and parents who have, in some degree or form, the train has derailed off the track. And it is my firm belief, based on my experience and education, that parenting should not be sort of apportioned just to families after the train has fallen off the track. And so we get a lot of referrals from the early childhood court system. We are contracted with them. But by that time, the train has fallen off the tracks. And it's very hard to teach and educate, even connect with valuable information, attachment-based information when one's brain is on fire or when one is in the bottom of the brain in fight, flight, and freeze. So oftentimes the families who are referred to us from court systems or from community-based care organizations like Partnership for Strong Families, which I'm sure you're aware of. But again, at that point, the train has derailed. And we love working with those families. We're able to move the needle, but there is still a gap in terms of services to parents and to families. And so a few points that I'd like you to ponder. Currently, the programs that I have noticed CTAP support are programs that are heavily focused on children, which should be the case because this is the Children's Trust. But I want to just ask you to consider whether or not we can achieve the same goals by not just serving the exosystem, which is the community, not just meeting these goals and outcomes for children by programs through the community, but actually getting to the root of the problem, which is parents and caregiving inside the home, which is the mesosystem. These are individuals that see the child every day, have a connection and a relationship with the child every day. That's where we want to reach, and that's what we believe. That's what the science says. That's where we begin to really change and move the needle. The second point that I would like for you to consider is number 2, the fruit, the tree, and the roots. Currently, a lot of our systems, not just in Gainesville, Florida, but a lot of systems are geared towards children, after school programs, enrichment programs, and they are necessary and wonderful. You will not hear me say anything different, but I will propose that there is a gap. There is a gap in how we reach our children. We have to reach back to the moms, the dads, the grandmother, the auntie, the uncle that is raising the child within the home. The school systems and after school systems, daycare programs, they're all beautiful and wonderful pathways, but I think we are not considering the most important, which is the roots, where these fruits are produced. And so we continue to pick fruits from a tree, expecting a different result without getting at the root. We continue to have a gap in our effectiveness and with our programming. I believe the Genesis Family Enrichment Center can meet that gap. We've been doing it for over 5 years. We've been doing it in a pandemic. We've been doing it with brains that are on fire. And I think that we need to do it from a proactive approach versus a reactive response. The third piece that I'd like for you to consider is a dysregulated parent can never regulate a dysregulated child. We use parent in a very broad way. So a parent may be anyone who's caring for a child. 5 more minutes?
I'm sorry, we only have 3 minutes to address it.
Minutes. Have I reached my 3 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think I'm going to wrap it up by leaving you with the information that you've been given. And I'm just going to ask you to consider the pathways that the Children's Trust have been going about meeting your priorities and meeting the outcomes for children. We need to reach back and look at those who are caring for our kids 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jeff Parker. Just want to bring some attention, just piggybacking off what Connie has said, and Sierra said, speaking on. I represent IGB Education. Just to give you a little background of what we are, what we do. I've spoken with several of you on the board already. We started 15 years ago at Eastside High School as a need, because our graduation rate at that time at Eastside was less than 25% for minority males. Through our program and other programs that our administration put in place, that number went from less than 25% to over 90%. In the time while we were there, I think now the number is over 80% still. Mr. Andrew is familiar with our program. Mr. Andrew was the principal at Eastside. I left in 2017. During that time, in transition from 2017 to 2021, we realized that we helped out hundreds of children with the IGB program at Eastside, but we realized that our community has a much greater need. So what we did is we thought about, instead of taking the interactions that we have with the high school kids, where we basically allow them to tread water and to basically help them get across the finish line, was to take our interactions and our programming and allow them to experience things differently when they're kindergarten through 5th graders. So what we've done is we partnered with the YMCA. We're running a pilot program with the YMCA beginning at the end of this month to the end of the school year. That's all has been raised. Private funding has already been raised to have that program run for at least the first 2 months. In addition to that, we ran programming over the last 2 summers where we ran a pilot program in 2021. We ran a program in 2022 where we were able to scholarship over 30 students for the full summer, for the full time during the summer time. During our program, when we teach students, financial literacy, problem solving, critical thinking, communication skills. And then to piggyback on what Ms. Pierce said, I've actually had conversations with her and other licensed mental health providers in town, is to address the mental wellness component for our students. All of those components will be addressed in our program that we've already offered in the summer, as well as in the after school program. What I ask is the board is, you're aware of our program, and we've been waiting, we've sat through the process to try and figure out when the next RFP will come about. But we had 31 students last summer that we were trying to find funding to continue the programming this past fall and into the school year. But now we're looking for ways of how can we get funded to continue the type of program. Obviously, in our environment and where we are in the county, it's all hands on deck to change the trajectory of our students. So I just want to introduce our program. I would be happy to meet with any of you, the board, to come back and present in a more finite detail of what we do about our program. But we're looking for ways where we can get the funding to continue the programming that we're offering for our students and enhance it to make it better. Thank you. You can see information on our program www.igbfund.com.
I have a question. Is it fun or fund with a D?
Fun, F-U-N. Like we're having fun.
That's why I didn't make sure I got it right.
So, there's no one else on the post citizen, input here now, and I kind of had a little small conversation with our executive director last week about funding opportunities for 8 entities that have been waiting. We, as a board, had decided, and that is an agenda item on here of us, how we're going to go forward with unsolicited proposals. I will say that I know there have been many people who have been waiting, because there were some really good promises, but there was, statements that were made as some, folks waiting until we, got through a strategic planning process so that we could receive our, RFP. And that has taken longer because it has to change in leadership. But just want the entities to know that we are considering that. If you would like to speak with Ms. Goldwire or Executive Director, and we're trying to figure out some way to get through to get on the agenda, make the presentation. But there is something on our agenda for how we're going to proceed forward. And we're going to consider something. So we do hear the public and what they're saying. I'm not as sensitive to it. We did have to just kind of pull back the reins, so to try to give some bearings about it, but it is taking a long time, and I didn't hear the question. All right, this time, are you ready for your executive director's report?
Yes, ma'am. Just good afternoon, everybody. I have the flu, so didn't want to be there and expose you all to this. Just want to highlight a couple of items for the month. Our Business and Leadership Institute for Early Learning, we held our masterclass kickoff. It was a great event on a Saturday. I can't remember the exact date now, but we had a full house. Wonderful program. The folks will be meeting once a month there in the same room at the trust. Again, it really was a great kickoff of that event. The other item that I wanted to highlight, we have 2 staff members who have been selected to serve on the fetal infant mortality review case team and the community action group. Mia and Christy are both representing the trust. This is a state-funded initiative looking at infant mortality in our county. So more information will be coming from their work on that, on those committees. But we are excited and looking forward to our participation in this initiative. Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, and I hope you're feeling better soon. Quickly, get back on your feet,
Thank you.
or then you'll be back in person with us, back in the office. Anyone have any questions or anything for Ms. Tanner? All right, thank you. Cheryl, I'm going to give your update on the steering committee.
Sure. So, the steering committee last met on January 9th. We met with staff. And our strategic planning facilitators, Nikki Martin Bynum and Boston Rutledge. Bonnie provided our group with an update on the listening project as well as data being reviewed for an environmental scan. She's been looking for some additional secondary data to pull on child well-being indicators that would support our strategic planning process. Bonnie also shared that they're looking at existing resources, including who the other community funders are, what programs they're funding, and that will help us better determine, how we can better align with the other funders that are going on out in the community. This will help us fill gaps and hopefully not duplicate information. During our discussion on the CPAC mission and vision, we were asked to respond to a question about what we envision a system of support that works effectively for children and youth in Alachua County looks like. As you can imagine, that was a pretty good discussion we had after that kind of a question. Some described it as a system where children and families are placed at the center and programs support and wrap around them. Another said it would be a system where we fund more coordinated efforts and promote more unified communities and a more unified community system of providers. Another member said that it would be a system that needs to have good communication and follow-up to know that the supports being put in place are effective and resulting in children thriving. Ms. Rutledge also led our group in a discussion on the theory of change and a roadmap to reach our mission and vision goals. That included a discussion on where we are currently, resources available to work toward our goals, the activities necessary to reach our desired outcomes, and need to define short and long-term goals, and then what would community look like if we're successful in our work. This prompted, again, another very lively discussion with our group, and the committee shared numerous ideas on what success would look like. It became really easy for us to want to fix everything at once, which we've seen in our group that, we want to fix everything. And I believe it was Member Pinkerson that said we probably need to be a little more targeted on our work. And so the other thing that we discussed is even though we all have a lot of ideas and comments on what we think would work or what would make a difference, we agreed that until we hear back from the listing project and what families are stating that they need from the trust and the resources they feel will positively impact the lives of their children, we really can't determine our final priorities without the community voice being heard, which is why we did the listing project. So to that end, our committee will be meeting again in person on February 23rd from 1 to 5 p.m. here at the trust office. We're going to have a data party where we're going to hear the results of the listing project, and then have some, I'm sure, very active discussion again on what we think that data has taught us. So, question?
I didn't catch the date of the data party, but
It is February 23rd, so a week from Thursday.
it's probably noticed or the whole, the other board members want to.
It is.
Are you all wanting us to come?
You are welcome. They will there be food? It's a party. It's a nap. I believe that, once we've met and discussed, I think that's what we shared with the board. The following time.
Right. And start with the March on it along and then you can scare them.
Yeah.
We're going to post a packet that has some stuff, and then there'll also be more information that
They hear the word party, they want.
I know.
That's a good thing. The same level of enthusiasm that you mentioned, I mean, this committee, I've gotten from them, they've been wonderful to work with, they show at every meeting. Most times we have to start watching the clock because it's time to end the meeting and we keep going. So I like that level of enthusiasm that they're showing us for having this discussion.
Anything else for Ms. Parley? I'm kind of, I may come to the 23rd, but I don't want to come to the 23rd and then have to sit through it all again. It's part of the working, but I don't want to, once I wanted to be 10 over. If you put the packet out, I think that will probably be good, so that we can do it.
If the food is good, it'd be good twice.
Where was that? Won't have food at the meeting, so. All right, if there's nothing else with, any other questions or comments for number 12, then moving on. We have one presentation that's scheduled for us today. The Mirror Image Leadership Academy. Going to come forward.
Good afternoon. Let me get a technical piece.
Well, introduce yourself to the board.
Good afternoon. While he's setting up, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is James Miller. I'm the Executive Director of Mirror Image Leadership Academy. I started with Mirror Image in April of last year, and I moved here 2 years ago. My wife is in graduate school here at the University of Florida, and I started out as a full-time chaplain with Haven Hospice, and then I transitioned into my role here at Mirror Image Leadership Academy. A little bit about myself: I have my degree in animal science and chemistry, and then I have a Master of Divinity from Howard University in DC. Glad to be here. Thank you.
And good afternoon, I'm Greg Bradley. I'm the founder of Mirror Image Leadership Academy and a native of Gainesville, so Metcalf, Howard Bishop, Eastside. And I spent 20 years in the corporate world, last being a partner in a consulting firm for moving back here. This is my second move to Gainesville. My first move produced this building right here. I worked for the CRA and I was the project lead in this building. Built here on Fifth Avenue, and now I own an insurance agency, second generation insurance agency. So we have a story that we just want to share with you today. And I am grateful for the opportunity to be able to present you this morning, or this afternoon. So I'm going to start with this statement. And this statement is that all mankind is created in the image and likeness of God. All right. And so before you think I'm about to go off into a religious presentation, I am not. But we start with this truth, is that all mankind is created in the image and likeness of God. And from that statement, I can go an infinite number of directions. But for what we want to present and what we want to talk about in the story we want to tell, I'm going to go from that to what does that mean for African Americans in Alachua County? Right. So when you look at African Americans in Alachua County, 8 out of 10 kids are born in a single parent home. 1 in 3 Black males is going to end up in prison at some point in lifetime. And depending on what statistic you look at, it's about a 40% poverty rate. Right. So now we go from the truth of we're created in the image and likeness of God to these facts and outcomes, which are also true. Right. So there has to be some distortion there. And just as Ms. Connie was speaking earlier, it is not for a lack of effort. Right? There are many, many programs that are geared towards trying to address these issues, whether it's mentoring, tutoring, outreach. The university has outreach, the college has outreach, churches have outreach. It's not for a lack of effort. So, but as I stated, I spent almost 20 years in management consulting as a strategy consultant. And so if we start with this truth and we end with these facts, and it's not for a lack of effort, then that should cause us to ask the question, are we asking the right question as we frame our problem? Right. And so we want to know, are we getting to root cause? Not a root cause, but one of the root causes. Because what we are proposing here is not a silver bullet. We do not have the answer for all things, right? But what we do have is a hypothesis, right? And so if you want to step out and solve a strategic problem, the first thing you have to have is a hypothesis. And so our hypothesis is simply this, is that there is already an untapped leader inside of young Black males that just needs to be developed and expanded by exposure. Right, so now I'm going from the broader community down to our problem set. And for us, our problem set is young Black males. Right? And we want to choose this group because as the man goes, so does our community. And you can look at the outcomes and see that it's the absence that really drives some of these outcomes. So we have a hypothesis, and the hypothesis is fundamentally, we start not with a deficit, but as an asset position. That you are created in the image and likeness of God. You do have a leader already on the inside of you. We want to help you discover that leader that is already there. Right? So we don't use words like disadvantage. We don't use words like underprivileged. We don't use vernacular like that. We use vernacular like we expect you to produce who you are, based on who you are, right? But in order to go down this path, we have to have a complete reconditioning of the mind, right? So the way we approach things is that the answers are somewhere out here. But what we believe is that the answers are within, right? So we've been given imagination, we've been given creativity, and that's the ability to solve the problems. If we want to solve our problems, the answers don't come from out here, the answers come from within. And once you can free a person's mind, they will never go back to thinking the way they were. They will never go back into bondage. So our whole premise here is that we have to recondition the minds of these young Black men to help them see themselves a different way. But also us as the problem solvers, as those that are framing this, we also have to recondition how we think about it. We can't take just a short time frame and think that that is going to be the answer. We have to take a broader perspective about how we look at and how we approach this problem. So for us, what we did was we created Mirror Image Leadership Academy as the structure to test this hypothesis. Okay, so we had a hypothesis first, and then we organized around like how do we organize to go and test this hypothesis? And what came out of that is Mirror Image Leadership Academy. And our premise is we got to help you discover the leader that God already made you. We don't need to make you a leader, we need to help you discover. So it's based on this model that we call the Mirror Image True Leader model. It's self-image plus purpose plus faith plus character plus work ethic. All right. So if you know who you are, if you know why you're here, if you're willing to step out on something that you can't see and believe that it's going to happen, if you have character, you have integrity, what you do in the dark matches what you do in the light, and you have work ethic, you're willing to work hard. There's no substitution for working hard. So we look at our leadership model, not in terms of how do I make friends and influence people? It's how do I become a better leader of self? So that is our approach, is not what to go do, but who do we need to help you become, right? Which is different than what is my profession. Right? Your profession is important, but it's not more important than who you are, right? So now this is agnostic to what your skin color is, it's agnostic to your socioeconomic status. If you look at these 5 pillars, it doesn't matter. Given the historical context of how we got in this situation, we need an accelerator. We want to take this model and we want to put gas on the fire to try to help and accelerate this. And our gas is exposure. So how do we take exposure and help to accelerate your development in self-image, purpose, faith, character, work? So that is what we do. Now, what is Mirror Image Leadership Academy? It is a 3-year leadership development experience that starts as incoming 7th grade. So we only have one window in, and that's the summer between 6th and 7th grade. And we will keep you for 3 years through the end of 9th grade. And so we got 3 pillars on which this stands. It's our summer academy, which during the summer, we have you for a whole month every day. Then we've got our school year academy, which is once a month, the second Saturday of every month throughout the school year, so from September through May. And then extended day academy, which we just started this year, which is to help provide academic support and intervention in areas around academic support. So what is really unique about this is exposure trips. So I will talk a little bit about that, but usually at this point, we get the question, well, how do you select students, right? That's always the question. So I'm gonna go ahead and address that question. We have a 3-step process, and we call our students scholars. So how are scholars selected? We work with Westwood, Howard Bishop, Lincoln, PK, Fort Clark. We have a student from St. Patrick. Now, from St. Patrick and Fort Clark, those are exceptions. They didn't follow this process. But the process that we use is we reached out to the schools and asked the principals and the staff, we explain what we're doing. And then they went and make recommendations to us as to who should be a part of our program. Right? And they look at 4 different things. And I actually talked to Mr. Bernie at Westwood today just to validate what they are looking at before they recommend something. So academic is that they've shown some past achievement, but they're currently just undergrade level, or they're a little bit undergrade level. Then they look at family dynamic, right? With the emphasis on giving us those that have one parent or one guardian in the household, and that has less male influence in their household, or they haven't sustained a traumatic situation. They've been involved in something traumatic. When it comes to behavior, we don't get the chronic misbehavior, but if you got a couple of referrals, we will take it. What we don't get recommended is those that have chronic misbehavior issues. And then the last piece is the commitment from the parent or the guardian, because we need them to understand that this is a 3-year commitment, not in one summer, but a full 3 years. So they give us those recommendations, and then the next step is we invite them to an information session. And we basically go through some version of this presentation that I'm going through now, give them an overview of what Mirror Image Leadership Academy is, we answer questions, and then we provide the enrollment information, right? And then it's up to the parent or the guardian to commit and complete that enrollment. So we let them self-select based on what they hear during the information session, whether or not this is something that they feel like they can commit to. Okay, so this is what we're about to start our 3rd year. So for the first 2 years, this is the process that we follow. Now, we may more formalize it as we go forward, but I did want to, because I know that's a question that we usually get, is how scholars selected. So I just want to go ahead and address that. Okay, so now let's go to exposure trips. We have a progressive model. So in year 1, we expose them to things locally. In year 2, it's domestic, and in year 3, it's international. So what we've done over the summer, right, is, I know this is really hard to read, so for those on Zoom, it's probably better for them. This is our schedule from last summer. We did 20 days of programming during the month of June. We had 2 cohorts, a 7th grade class and an 8th grade class. And they went to places like Aquin Jones, University of Florida, Cotton Club. And what you'll see is the pillar of the model around self-image, whether it's character, purpose, faith. We try to tie their exposure to the curriculum that happens in the morning. So our emphasis is self-image, purpose, faith, character, and work ethic, right? It's the stuff you can't see. So when you go out on an exposure trip, we want the person to tie their story to the pillar of the model that we're talking about for that day, so that it all ties together. So what you see is important. Who you see and who you talk to is just as important, okay? So during our year-long program, the School Year Academy, and I'll let Mr. Miller speak here. I'm doing the majority of talking because I know we want to get through this expeditiously, but and we don't want to take up too much time. But on the second Saturday of every month, we meet with them, we go through curriculum, and then they go on an exposure trip. So just this past weekend, they visit the Alachua County Sheriff's Department and the School of Business. And I'm just going to let Mr. Miller highlight that visit.
Yes, as you can see here, we have a breakdown of our morning schedule. So our scholars arrive, and then we move into our time of curriculum, daily affirmations, and then we go on our exposure trip. And I was so excited that this past Saturday, our scholars had the opportunity to go to the Alachua County Sheriff's Office, and Sheriff Watson was there and Major Yeager, and they got a chance to talk to the scholars about their experience, the different opportunities in law enforcement. They got a chance to also address being on the wrong side of law enforcement, and our scholars got a chance to have a question and answer session with the sheriff for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then they gave them a tour, and they actually got a chance to go into the 911 call center. And so they got a chance to experience all of that on this past Saturday. And then at the School of Business, we got a chance to partner with the School of Business, and we had a lot of African-American business students come, and they moved through an entire program with our scholars. They had some team building activities. They got a chance to hear about the different business opportunities walking around at UF and Peppermint School of Business. And so it was a really eye-opening experience for our scholars to be able to have that exposure experience. But as Member Bradley was saying, our exposure experiences is not just about the place, it's about the person that we are placing our scholars before. Because we want to see how that particular person and their experience ties into self-image, purpose, faith, character, and work ethic. Thank you.
All right, so just, was that the hook? Member
That
service?
was for all y'all, so I'm gonna let you wrap it up
Okay.
and explain for us real quick.
All right, okay. Let me skip through,
Okay.
then, we were going to show you a video. This is about our extended day. I didn't know how much time we had, sorry. We started this Monday through Thursday, 4 to 7, to provide academic support, where we're doing an assessment, providing an action plan, and then out of that assessment, determining what intervention may be needed in math or reading, and then looking for the resources to connect to them. So our approach is not to make better 12-year-olds, but to focus on making better 62-year-olds, because in that 12-year-old is 3 generations. So if we can help turn you just in one path, help you become a more responsible man, then become a responsible husband, then become a responsible and loving father, right? If you go back to those outcomes, 8 out of 10 kids being born in single parent homes. Once a child is born out in a single parent home, you're now dealing with a symptom. We want to address it before it ever becomes a problem. 1 in 3 Black males going to prison. If your father doesn't go to prison, it's a good chance you're not going to go to prison, because we rinse and repeat what we see. And then 40% poverty for business owners and entrepreneurs. Wealth transfer is still tied up in the ownership of your primary residence. So that's what we are trying to get at, so that we can accomplish the real vision of positively impacting the trajectory of Black families. So really quickly, here's our board. Some of them are here. Member Wilburn, Member Beard, and Member Stratton are here with us today. This is the staff. James is our only full-time employee. He has a staff of part-time facilitators. But this is what I really wanted to get to here, is that we're in our 3rd year. So in year 1, we raised about $83,000. We spent $45,000. We started with 12 kids, most exposure. Last year, we added the second cohort of 19 students. So we currently have 30 scholars. We hired Mr. Miller as our full-time executive director. We raised about $177,000. This year, we have a budget of $460,000, because we're adding another cohort of 25 scholars to get to 55. We have an international exposure where the kids, the third, the eighth, the ninth grade cohort will be going to Ghana in July. And when we project out for when we have 75 scholars in 2025, we're looking at an 800,000 to $1 million budget. Up until this point, we've had a lot of support from the community. You can see those at the bottom are collaborations and partnerships. So we didn't get money from them, but Santa Fe is collaborating with us and providing the space for the after school. Delta and Bank of America and the Atlanta Hawks helped us with our exposure to Atlanta last year. So here's my ask of this board. Of that 460,000, there's 81,000 for a summer academy, there's 61,000 for our school year academy, and there's another 92,000. That's $234,000 with an average of about $4,200 and something per scholar. Right? Our ask is that you would consider an off-cycle budget request to address this. And we're not asking for the out of local areas. We have Atlanta exposure, we have international exposure that adds another 143,000. And then we've got about 88,000 of general overhead and expenses. So we're not taking ourselves and our board off the hook to go raise additional funding, but we would love to have some support for the Children's Trust to address the local programming that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brad, Mr. Miller.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have one comment and one question. That 62-year-old man, he's not 62. I know some in this room closer to 60. I think he's younger than I. And he looks too old to be 62. So just a small objection from the judge. Is it possible that you could provide our executive director or one of our staff members a copy of your presentation so that we could, or some materials so that you could look at it in a little more detail, even maybe the video so we could look at it. Absolutely. We have time.
Yes.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Again, thank you for your presentation. It's very good.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Powerful, because the question that we have as a board is, and I guess what I addressed on item 11 is, what do we have that's unallocated and how are we gonna look at addressing the funds? And in addition to this very great organization, we heard from Mr. Parker today, who's doing a similar thing for a similar age group, K-5. And I'd love to hear from the executive director as to where she believes this would fall out of our 4 goals, because I think this falls right under goal 3, which is all children have nurturing support caregiver family relationships. We have some unallocated funds in that goal. And we have to kind of discuss at the board how we're going to do that.
All right, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't say, but I did not be able to say now, what I'm doing, you want to think is that. I said earlier, there's such a request when I'm out in the community, or I go to board events, whatever. We do have a number of people who say, we're waiting patiently for the trust to open up funding opportunities and for us. And it's not our fault that y'all change EVs. And I say, you're right, it's not your fault. And I do think we do have that item there. So we probably will continue to get these off-cycle things, but it's we're gonna have to.
I mean, my other comment to that is, I know that Director Kynett is going to be bringing back to us some recommendations on fund balance. Now, it's not recurring, but there are certain things that we may want to look at in regards to upfront startup kind of allocations of funds with organizations like the one we just heard from that can provide for ongoing fundraising and off the ground. This organization has taken it on in the last 2 years on their own, and apparently had some pretty good initial success, has an incredible board and a lot of vested community members. And so, I'm also interested in looking at when we get the allocation of fund balance and what kind of plan is for that, which again is 7 figures sitting in the bank account. how can we get that out into the community and be able to return back to some really.
Yes, thank you, since I'm usually the one that's not happy with one-off requests for funding. Like, in full disclosure, also say that I'm a consultant to the folks at Mirror Image right now, it's, working with them on some things. But I guess when I look at this issue, I think that we heard from 3 organizations that are doing services in areas that are within our goals. And my concern is that, as you, sure, certainly, I hear from people in the community, the delays, but we're hearing from individual organizations. And what concerns me in this process, if we're going to say we need to take a look at how we spend money and do something, I think we need to look at it in terms of categories and make sure that we're not just prioritizing providers who have the contact or the energy to contact us and reach out and say, hey, I'm out here doing this. We could use the trust's help. I don't know whether we do that by inviting groups of providers within a category to talk to us instead of doing one-offs, but I'm just concerned that as we develop this, we don't just listen to the folks who have the ability to come to us without knowing that there's potentially a funding opportunity. And because I just don't think that's an equitable way to do that. So I get it. I'm frustrated too, and how long it's taken us to get to a strategic plan and a funding allocation. But I also think we need to be careful that we're not just simply funding an organization because they have the ability to come before us. And again, I said this, the last of these one-off presentations, nothing, no judgment at all on the folks who have come here to present it. They're all amazing organizations doing great work. I just think structurally, that's something that we need to be attentive. And if we're going to start to do funding outside our cycle, then we ought to look at the area. And that's part of the proposed policy. So it's jumping ahead a little bit, but I think we need to be very careful.
Chrissy, did March the 20th is when preliminary scope of what's out there. Is that correct? Because I know, when we had discussion previously, well, let's wait till the budget cycle, and which was, usually June or whatever. But we were told as we were going through this, that we would have probably a pretty good indication of what may or may not be lacking, based upon the input that we received from the community. Now, was that going to be March or the April? Because I know there's one early April, like the 10th, and there's one, late March, like the 20th.
I think you're referencing the data party that's taking place on the 23rd.
But that's for the steering.
That's for this.
But we were, I think, and if I'm not, if I'm incorrect on this, I'll let you know. But I think we asked the question, are we gonna have to wait till the end, right we're at near the budget cycle before we get that input? And we were told that we would have a pretty good idea early in the process what we needed to do. So do you think that would be in the March or the April meeting?
I believe so, maybe the March or the April meeting, because one of them, there's a co-meeting, if you will, and I'm looking at mine because you guys see me.
April 3rd.
So that's the day where in the first half is going to be the steering committee meeting, and then after that the board meets, and so there will be some presentations for, I believe, what it is. From the steering, so you'll have the 23rd, and then you'll have the report on
And I guess the other component that of this conversation that I think Maggie was alluding to was the fact that, yes, it's frustrating that this is taking as long as it's taken. But we also want to see, where the priorities are. The three programs that we heard about today are great programs. So do we maybe allocate less money in one area and give more money into another area? And I think that was the discussion that we were, waiting for before we, which is because we hate to say, okay, we like the program, give you some money and then the compensation changes, which, may or may not happen.
Right. So it's definitely a topic of discussion that I've been having with, Director Hunter, not only for, newer organizations that we're learning about, but we also have several providers that we're currently funding. And how that works with, our new funding policy. Do we stop funding all of them? Does everyone now need to apply for additional dollars? So that discussion has started taking place, specifically so that the committee can, begin to weigh in as a topic of discussion and also bring that back to the board. I don't know, I see Marcia shaking her head, but I don't know if she wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. Thank you, Christy. Yeah, she's absolutely right. We, as we think about how we move forward, and we have a request for unplanned funding here shortly on the agenda. It's important that we are equitable because we have quite a few programs who would love to be funded or receive additional funding, right? In addition to the 3 programs that you heard from today, we have, I think, 4 million in the supported bucket. Ken, you were asking where would these programs fund? We kind of put, I think you all set aside about 4 million in that area. Although we're hearing, right, last week or week before last, the county and the city both declared the gun violence as, as a major issue. And we already know that that is an area where we have not put a lot of funding. So I think we need to be careful how we move forward, understanding that I'll tell you honestly, every program that everybody I've had an opportunity to meet with, I love what they do. I love their heart. They're all doing good work. It's a matter of how we determine what we're going to fund. The meeting on the 23rd is going to give us our first opportunity to hear what the community had to say. The workshop on April 3rd, I believe it's April 3rd, is going to be an opportunity for you all to hear all of that information and for us to have a discussion with the steering committee as we then decide what the funding priorities should be. So we're right here. It is, again, taking longer, than maybe some thought, since you all have been having this discussion even before I got here, but we're right here now. So what I would say is give us time to hear from the community, give us time to hear what they had to say. And then on April 3rd, we might be able to come to that meeting, your meeting, that afternoon and then make some decisions.
I'm always, don't think I'm a broken record, but I'm always trying to figure out ways to make a systems change. And I thought the 3 presentations that we heard today were very exciting. But what would get me to jump out of my seat and write a check right now would be if you told us how you were going to join up this parenting support program to the K-5 program to the sixth graders that are selected for the leadership program. I would be so excited if we could say, yeah, we get this, we're going to go for root causes. And although I have never been in partnership with these other programs before, I'm going to go home and think about a way we can do it. Because that's the systems change. That's where it stops being a patchwork quilt and begins to be a true safety net. And I think you guys can do it. I think every single one of you is brilliant enough to figure out how to do that.
We can go figure it out right now.
Right? Right? I mean, I hope the rest of the board would agree with me that would be very exciting.
And that's what we talk about is the, how the community becomes more cohesive. And so that it's not just, we have a lot of putting out fires. But it's how we all become firemen together. And instead, let's prevent fire from happening and back it up and then keep working collaboratively together through all the stages of the child's life and as a family changes and their childhood. And I think I love what you're saying because I do think that would make a huge difference.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry, can I get my microphone first?
So, Director Kiner, what I heard you say is data party February 23rd, workshop April 3rd. When are you bringing forward potential uses and thoughts regarding fund balance?
How about this? Why don't we bring something to the March meeting about fund balance?
Okay, that would be great. That was sooner than what I thought. I mean, my comment, Madam, thank you for that. My comment, Madam Chair, is I agree with Dr. Hart, and I also think that we have to think about fund balance as how are we innovating to change the system of care. And I've heard a lot today, innovation and also really the ability to scale. And if it's integrated with our early pre-K and then moved into kind of where they're talking about now, taking those kids at 7th grade and really getting to a point whereby, they're talking about solving the problem by the time they're in 9th or 10th grade, focusing on family and this whole kind of system. I would be willing to take some of that fund balance and see if we can move into an innovative type of approach that connected all of the other providers that we are attempting to fund in a strategic way. That was kind of a one-off. I know we're gonna talk about it on the 11th, how we deal with kind of new programs, but I'm really thinking kind of system-wide like that. So those are my comments and what I guess I would say to the folks at the agenda is we don't have an answer today, but hopefully you'll start to think about what you're hearing. Then we'll have an idea of what's the resources that staff is looking at in March. That could be one-time funding, that could change the system.
Well, I want to just, Dr. Hart, you often say things that are profound. And I was sitting here thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be great if while those boys were getting all this attention and the Genesis Project would come out here. And I love you said, thank you so much for saying it. Because I do think it's so important that we make this system change in the coordination of services versus what I saw over the past with overlapping of the same services, which obviously we're trying to avoid. So I just want to take a moment. Thank you for saying what I was thinking, because I couldn't articulate it as well as you did, but I love it. I'm excited too. You say it like that. Thank you. Thank you guys.
Can I add one thing? Yes, ma'am. Of course, I agree completely with what Nancy said and what others have said. I think the other thing that is so exciting to me hearing these presentations is thank you all for taking the strengths-based perspective. Thank you all for taking a leadership and starting bringing out the leadership in young men and of course young women. And I really appreciated the fact that we're focusing on thinking about things from a positive perspective and taking a strengths-based perspective about assets that we all have and in terms of being human, right? And there are additional people who need additional supports to build capacity, but this is something really exciting for me to think about. It's not looking at a deficit model, it's starting from a promotion and a prevention kind of approach. We can't not put out fires too, right? But we'll keep putting out fires forever if we continue to take that.
So from my perspective, then, as we bring all this together and as we start to look at a strategic plan, we have 4 focus areas that we list as problems. We do.
So perhaps one of the challenges is to take a look at those focus areas and figure out what opportunities they represent. Because that's where we're gonna be able to see how they intersect, right? And how what those three areas that we heard about today could be brought together in an RFP that encourages that, right? A solicitation that encourages that. And I guess that's really the higher iteration of my soapbox around. I don't want us to be provider focused because they can come. I want us to really be solution focused and say, what are the opportunities the data show us there, and how do we integrate those opportunities in an organized fashion so that we invite folks to talk to each other who might not normally talk to each other. Because they can share, oh, I'm either in a handoff kind of way. You started off over here by teaching these parents when they're very, very young. And then we hand it off to this next group who's going to support them through this phase. How do we do that? And so I think that's exciting opportunity. And Cheryl, I'm glad you're spearheading that effort, but I'm hoping that the plan we come up with is one that leads us to solutions, not just a focus on problem data.
And I think the issue is that all of the data that are collected frequently, as we all know, and all of these repositories talk about the risks, talk about the negative, right? And
Just brought that, Dr. Navarro, our current budget has these 4 goals. And I think it's important to just kind of restate them briefly with the dollar. We've got goal 1, all children are born healthy and remain healthy, $1 million. We've got 262 unallocated. Goal 2, all children can learn what they need to be successful, 4.6 million. We don't have any unallocated there. Goal 3, all children have nurturing and support caregivers. We have $1 million, $500,000 is unallocated. I feel like everything we heard today kind of falls into that bucket. Maybe the second one. And then goal 4, all children live in the same community. We've got $1 million there and 900,000 unallocated. Some of what we heard today also kind of falls into that. So I think when we have our discussion on February 23rd at the data policy and April 3rd at the workshop, those to me are kind of like available unallocated dollars. What I'm really talking about though is in March, having fund balance, having a discussion saying, look, if we did a one-time thing here, you know, it's not going to repeat, but it's related to these goals long-term that staff is keenly aware of because they talk to all the providers. They've been involved in the listening project. And those are also additional funds that may be available for innovative kind of changing the system, Dr. Hart, changing the way Dr. Hart and Dr. Schneider have pounding in our head. I think this, that's what I'd love to have staff thinking about with regard to. And I think that's early enough to where it's before summer. It may not solve all the problems that we're hearing about, but it'll kind of get us started as we continue to refine it.
And just to follow up on that, what I'd then like to see that come back as is not one-off recommendations, but like how do these things all fit together and how do we fund or issue an RFP for a collaborative approach to using some of these dollars to glue them together so that it's not just, again, one-off thinking. We're very, it seems to me sometimes that we're very provider focused rather than solution. What are we trying to achieve? And how do those folks come together to help us achieve that via whatever funding we get? And I think that's to me, that's the challenge, is how do we become solution focused in our funding and RFP process and not provider focused. And I say that as somebody who's, you know, who had 30 years of coming and begging for funding as a provider, right? So it's not that I don't recognize the importance of that, but we need to think about it in a higher order. I think we should.
Well, it goes back to that question of people trying to what is successful. And I think this is part of that conversation on, you know, what success would look like.
Ken, all the comments that I heard you say was you said it would be a one-time thing. And I think if we do a one-time thing, we're putting in some situation that we created at the beginning of the when we awarded, awarded money where we said it's just gonna be a one-time thing, and then there were expectations that were created. I think if we want to do this, we're probably going to do it right. And I think the way that we want to do it is, and Dr. Hart has experience with this, which did Children's Services Council. That when the county advocated that y'all go figure it out, it took a while to do it, but y'all actually created programs, working to create programs, and it took a little longer to do it that way, but we came up with some things, some worked, some didn't work. But I think if we're going to have money that we put out, we should go ahead and just say, here's money that's unallocated. Let's try to get into the system that we created, which is I think some of the programs that we're doing are on a three-year cycle, in the second year of the 3-year cycle, so that we can, so that they can go ahead and know that there will be funding in the future. And I know this might not music, but people in the audience hears that they're gonna have to go through some sort of process. But if we're gonna allocate money, we need to see what else is out there. We can do it by creating collaborations or just soliciting, but we're setting ourselves up, I believe, for creating a problem with the public if we do it on a one-time basis, because we've seen what happens with that.
Well, that's a true startup.
Yeah.
And there are startup funds.
I'm gonna do something with that.
So I think, Ken, I'm go ahead, Ken. Go ahead.
I'll just make a statement. We've got a lot in the bank. I'm not gonna say the number. I'm gonna hear about that in March. I want to harp on. But we also have 1.7 million of unallocated money. Right now, this year.
And that's recurring.
And that's recurring. And I hear you loud and clear strategically. Long term, I'm totally with you. But short term, we've got providers that are dealing with what we know are now. And I don't want to say at the end of September, we still have 1.7 million in the bank for doing this strategically right and lose a whole other year if we can deploy some innovative money for some now issues. I've said that a lot. I'll hear me say that a lot. And I'd rather deal with the problem. Well, I told you it wasn't going to be recurring, but we're dealing with some issue right now, than have that 7-figure, 8-figure runs.
Can we, since the discussion is there anyway, Madam Chair, could we move to step item 11 ahead of the teamwork allocation? We're pretty much having the. Yeah, we're having a conversation now, so I guess we will go ahead and then go. But I got chair. Yes, Member Andrews.
So just a lot of great things said. Yes, I think we have some urgency now issues, and we have that continuum of services that we want to bring together for the long term that are sustainable, right? And I think as been said much more eloquently than I can say, we definitely need to figure out kind of the clearinghouse format as to where are we duplicating the services, where are we missing opportunities to serve and meet needs and create more opportunities. So I don't know who does that work, if that's our staff. I do think that's one of those strategic things that has to be brought together. What all are we doing? And that's where the give and take and the ebb and flow come over time too, is if we see some repetitive services, well, then we don't need all of those services and we can earmark that to go somewhere else. But certainly I think it's that sustainable continuum of services, but there are some things that we need to deal with immediately now in our community with our children, and they need our help. So.
And since I had it before I called for item 11, I want to split 6. So we have, I'm kind of sitting in the middle of what Holiday is saying. I embrace wanting to wait to get this plan, but we do have a lot of things that are going on. And I think we have the capability of putting forth money to start. And we have the unallocated funds that we can allocate to things that are ongoing. But I guess like for me, it's almost a little difficult for us to kind of say the things that we said, because the system and 5 of the appointees that are here are part of systems that only treat symptoms anyway. And we want to get past that. But I think we need to like we gotta really be careful to continue to just kick the can down the road and not, really do something. I mean, and I just feel really bad that we're gonna enter in the budget season again, and we gotta determine a millage rate. When we're sitting there, we have money that we haven't allocated. I just think it's, you know, I mean, I'm doing things right, Meg. I don't doubt that at all. I mean, we've got the board has gotten itself into a couple tight spots, but I think we gotta, you know, with all that we have going on in our community and the voters of this community assessing themselves additional tax to address these issues, and then we have the 9 of us here that just kind of been falling away, doing the best we can, and after a while, that's not gonna be a good thing. So let's bring forth the 11. I'm gonna just, I think we can get through these next 2 quick. Since we didn't do that in the agenda, adoption, let's follow our agenda as printed. And we'll go finish with our presentation from Mirror Image Leadership Academy. Thank you all for all of the input on that. Some old business that we have here, teamworks, funding recommendation. I think the staff person and Mr. Brothers behind. Item 10, are you coming to the podium when you go?
Yeah. How's everyone? This is a follow-up from the January presentation I did around teamwork Alachua. I presented a different approach to the pilot that was achieved last year with both agencies, Google Industries and Minority Business. What I want to present to you today, because we sent out documents to both agencies to present to us scope of services for what we presented with you, and also a budget and budget. I want to revisit back on what we discussed last month, the roles and responsibilities for both agencies. Minority business listing, we were going to be contracting out for them to provide services for recruitment events for youth and job sites for the summer 2023. And teams working Alachua, and with Goodwill Industries here offering to contract onboarding youth, payroll, handling of youth pay, provide work readiness training for the youth, weekly job coaching, work with work sites, and collect the required data for the youth for the summer for 2023 teams work Alachua, and the collaboration effort with both of those agencies. So today I'm going to be presenting the ask of the budget for the model program for this summer. Just to go over a few of what we received from both providers. I'll start with Minority Business Listing. With their scope of services around youth employer recruiting events and advertising and marketing, their budget request was $102,500. Goodwill Industries of North Florida, the Teams Work program implementation is geared around the staffing. With them taking on the full bulk of the youth this year, last year we had 220. They're going to be taking on 220 youth for employment. Last year they were responsible for 115 of those students. So they have to recruit more staffing. They're asking for 5 additional staff coaches for that program as well. And also the minimum wage for the youth, I'll get to that in the next part of the salary. The minimum wages went up from $10 to $11 an hour for youth. So that's also asked for an increase of the budget that we will be needing for Goodwill Industry to supply that service. Also, as the payee for all the youth, which last year, if you guys recall, Goodwill was paid for their kids, and Minority Business, we had 2 temp services work with those youth, which was additional contracts we had dished out. So that brings up a total of the budget requests. There is an increase of what last year was. Last year's budget was $750,000. We're asking the board to approve 2023 budget recommendation for Team Work Alachua for $866,496.98.
Let me just make it 5. It's 5.
You got it. So that is an increase of $116,496.98.
With that recommendation.
Second.
Question. Dan, how much did we actually spend on the salaries for the kids last?
Total? I would not have that. That would be more a fiscal question.
We know that, roughly. It was less than 500,000.
It was less than 5, but it was pretty close to, I want to say something around 4 between the two contracts.
Yeah, so the increase was really more salaries here, you know, and we, as staff recommending that the difference comes out of the reserves come out.
I'll refer that to.
And
I think the difference will come out of the unallocated.
In which category?
we have most unallocated up. We don't think we have any unallocated up, so.
Yeah, so teams were, right, there is. No, there is, and that kind of, I mean, it looks to me, just if I'm looking at the thing kind of you were looking at, it looks to me like there's still $500,000 unallocated there. Is
No, that's what the.
that for 3? That 513, 411 is for both 3?
Yeah, goal 2 has that, it's up, it's going up, yeah. 750 is what we allocated.
So there's no unallocated in that.
Someone program has, TBV of $1,000,006.
Where now?
If you look on page 34, summer programming, that's where this falls.
Oh, that's where we're gonna come from. That's right.
Oh.
I remember back to the last discussion.
Clarification, I believe that unallocated number you have there to be determined is based on contract that Nicole is still doing.
Yeah, they're still executing summer contracts. We rolled over all of those contracts for something.
So I guess we really do know that there's gonna be any unallocated. Yeah,
So if I recall correctly, the amount we had, some people had budget, they had a contract that was for an amount that they did not use. And there were some people who needed more, or I had requested for, an increase in their contract, so that's all included in here, those are still being,
So let me ask this question for staff. Can that TBD 1.665, can you bring back the kind of the status of where we are on that at our next meeting? I would just add that in.
Yeah, I mean, all of those contracts, the start dates for them are April 1st. So they're executing them as we speak.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's gonna be any unallocated money there, and if not, then it would be.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty tight. What the unknown is, as much as you try to plan for what your needs are, is what your kid response is gonna be. And that's why we ended up with money last year.
so if that doesn't pan out, then we would need to either authorize some money out of fund balance or reallocation from one of the other areas where we've got a lot allocated, then we probably won't have time to expand, which would be my bet.
Or exactly, that bring back the recommendation for that.
Yeah.
Meeting or the floor.
Is that an amendment to your motion?
Yeah, where it's coming from.
Is that an amendment?
Predetermined that we have this plan. Because there's one that has got $900,000. So there's probably an over allocation there, and that can be something that.
If we want a recommendation, I'll, as a seconder, I'll accept that amendment to the motion.
Staff just brings back a recommendation for where that additional money should come from, either unallocated, reserves or fund balance.
And I'm asking them to be okay to raise that to the strategic plan.
Want to be one case. So approve, and then fiscal can come back with recommendations based on where they want to go.
so, and I'll just say, what was your amount? The increase from what's been allocated is 116,500. Yeah, like 16,500, that's what it is there. 16,500.
That's fine.
Like 2 cents or something.
It's a.
Yes, Judge.
I have a question about advertising and marketing. Can you tell me what that's going to look like? What are they anticipating using that money for?
Well, they're gonna be going out advertising the program, recruiting, and hosting events. as well. So they're gonna be advertising all these events. We really want to recruit more so in the rural areas than we did last year. So it's gonna be a lot of effort pushed to the rural areas, but there's gonna be radios, whatever commercials, flyers, handing out. I don't have all the details memorized in my head, but it's in their scope, but it's consistent of just getting the program outreach to the community and also in workforce areas as well.
So looking for both employers and.
And recruiting the youth, yeah.
Thank you.
No discussion? Any citizen input on this agenda item? Okay, seeing that, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Item 11, draft request for unplanned funding. We have talked about this. And, Governor Turner?
Yes, ma'am. You are correct. We've covered this in spurts all throughout this meeting. Staff worked with member Labarda to come up with the draft of the policy. Cut into the chase. The guidelines read, the board will charge staff with reviewing the issue and researching the following: the extent and urgency of the problem presented, the existing services or providers addressing issues or providing the services, potential other sources of funding to address the issue or to provide the services, and or partnerships or collaborations needed to address the concern or provide the service. So that would be one of the instructions for staff. And then number 2, once the issue has been researched, staff should bring back to the board a recommendation to defer any action to the next planning or budget cycle as important but non-emergent. So the issue would be a non-emergent issue, meaning it could wait. Or the recommendation could be that CTAC convene existing providers and funders to better address the problem. A recommendation could come forward where we are amending the budget or strategies in order to include the problem, or a recommendation to issue an RFP or single source contract to address the issue. Maggie, is there something you want to add to this?
No, actually, the gist of this came from a conversation I had actually with David Lance about how they had handled kind of the one-off, bringing issues or requests for funding to their attention. Since one of theirs is one of the bigger and most established CSCs, and basically this is just follows what he had said they would do, to have staff research it and bring back a recommendation. And that doesn't have to be long, the months of research. It could be a very immediate or urgent response, but at least look at it and make sure that we're addressing it as thoroughly and efficiently as possible.
Yes, so I like this draft, for when you talk to David, do they allocate a certain amount of their funding for one-time things like, you know, in a $7 million budget, we put aside $500,000 for these types of things, or is that not that fast? Do they?
They don't do that way, but I suspect that given $100 and some million in they've got enough variance at any given time. So we could do that, we could set aside a budget for that. This was really more concerned with the process than, you know.
Well, I'm just thinking through, Director Kiner, so in hearing what we heard today, and I know you're hearing about more, how would you envision us kind of implementing this policy? I have no problem with this policy, I'm just thinking through, like, from what I heard today, how would you see that work?
So I think that kind of what we heard today would be where you all would have staff go back and look at, are there organizations that are currently providing the service already? Do we have providers that are out here doing something similar? Then if not, then staff would come back and say to you, this is unique. We feel that it is, it should be funded. And here's here's the amount that they're asking for. And here's the area where we have funds and we could do a funding source here. So I think the process could still work, would work well.
I would move staff's recommendation, and I would ask that staff actually think about what they've heard from, this whole fiscal year, and let's put this in place so that you come back to us with recommendations on systemic versus kind of innovative approach. What do you want to move staff recommendation? Thanks.
And I have a question, anyone have a question?
I'm just gonna perseverate on language if I can. Up in the front part, we talk about issue, and can we just use the word issue instead of problem with this document? So we're practicing what we're preaching, not as everywhere it says problem, but issue or challenge or whatever.
So like you would say, recommendation amending the budget with strategy in order to include the issue brought. Yeah.
I think sometimes words matter.
So, Madam Chair, in light of what transpired today with the three organizations, is there something, by accepting this recommendation, what do we do with those three organizations? Do we say, okay, let's refer it to staff, and so they don't have to wait until we go through the cycle, that they can do the research, staff can do the research, so that when we are ready to make implementation, they have done in the background, and they can make a recommendation to the board.
That was in my mind. I think that's what would happen.
Okay, so you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think if we adopt this policy, then staff will have empowered to go and have some discussion to bring back recommendations to us.
Do y'all, do y'all want that to be a separate motion? Or okay. All right.
So my question, I want to circle back to what Member Brown said, or he would ask, is not just for this year, but going forward. How would we, because this year the discussion has been that we would slot any new ones with proposal into our existing budget and allocation categories. So going forward, when we do prepare our budget, would we set aside a percentage of the budget for such things that may be unallocated? I mean, that may be unsolicited. We may set somebody, because somebody may come,
Yes.
What we have in our county now is we have funds and a lack of providers. Because in the past, we never had providers. So people are coming up and they are seeing opportunities to meet the needs of youth in our community. So 0 to 18, what the thing says, what our statute says, but it may be something that comes up and we may already be, have, it may be more, we're requesting more than what a particular category has. So if we have a pot of money that's set aside for something, that's unanticipated or unforeseen at that time, I think kind of continue to, I think I like that better than taking from an existing category, which money. And I was gonna ask you to modify your motion to be that, but I guess we don't have to put that in.
Well, I can tell you what we had a similar type of thing at the Board of County Commissioners with our cap, where we had allocated a certain amount of money, and then we put another piece aside for new programs. And that has worked fairly well. I will tell you that, whenever the size of the budget gets filled with a new program.
Don't have that all this.
Yeah, we did, and it got done really quickly as far as that amount, it was a small amount. I think that's a fun balance budget discussion. with regards to, okay, do we need to create an innovative fund of some number with that fund balance money? And how much is that, as opposed to kind of this policy? I think that's more kind of, if lots of providers that are out of cycle. And I think that's more of a kind of a budget discussion as opposed to this right here. This is, we've got some issues, how can we address it? Should we put it in cycle or take a one time?
Yeah, and I would say that's a good use of fund balance, and because then after that initial price of funding, then it comes back to, okay, now we have a full budget to plan for next year, how does it fit in and where does it fit in? So I think if it's an urgent, I think an urgent request is something that should be considered for fund balance. Some of it may be lapsing dollars. I don't think that's the same. This is just the process for evaluating the merit and the need. The other is on an emergent or annual basis, how do we then structure our planning for that? In this year, you're right, it's different because we've got pots of money and unallocated that are unallocated throughout the budget, that we want to spend. But I think going forward, I think that's a set aside from that fund balance. I think as sort of a reserve for emergency funding is not a bad thing to have set aside as a programmatic thing for fund balance.
We've got the motion, yeah, to what Dr. Tanner said, 1A, 2, B, C, and D, just replace problem with issue. And then, yeah.
I have a question about the language, Dr. Snyder. 1B, you want the word concern, also the issue instead of concern?
I didn't see it, I'm sorry, didn't say that.
Sorry.
Yeah,
One.
Yes.
Yeah.
Issue.
that's the issue. We'll provide, so.
I mean, I really like what they were saying about, identify a working hypothesis, right, around issues rather than around the problem.
I just wanna, take the shackles off the staff a little bit when they're considering these, requests from, providers in the community, because I could see a way that you could actually put these three programs together and see some of the funding coming from goals 3 and 4, where we've got a lot of unallocated funds.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want staff to work creatively with these amazing people in the community who've never even dreamt of being partners with each other. And if an incentive could be created by the Children's Trust to make it attractive, like it would not be attractive if each one of these three supplicants only got what they came for. But it would be really attractive if they got what they came for and then something else that would require them to converge their programs a bit. I just really see an opportunity for staff to be creative. So take the shackles off, go for it.
What, there's no.
Any other discussion from the board? Is there, I'm gonna ask citizen input. Citizen input? None, all in favor? Holders?
Madam Chair, I would move that we, refer the three programs that it was on the day to staff to give the evaluation, set up and the, request for unplanned funding.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Citizen input? You probably state your name, have 3 minutes before.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
Greg Bradley, we agree 100%, and not only, we have some things in our presentation we just didn't get to that connects to teamworks and how we become a feeder to them, and Jeff and I have been talking already about collaboration. Can work with Connie, so we are in 100% agreement that we take the shackles off and let staff get creative. We will be innovative, and we will come back to you with something that is holistic, not perfect, but definitely a system approach as opposed to a point in a system. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bradley, for saying that, because even in his presentation, he has a part where he wants parent involvement.
And so, I mean, I agree, it's so beautiful, so thank you again. That's it.
Any other citizen input? All right, seeing that, all in favor of referring these three programs to staff to, research how they can collaborate and how we can fund them. All right. Opposed? No. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Yes.
I wanna, so with the new policy, that also includes staff making recommendations about funding in general for these types of programs, because they wouldn't necessarily be a sole source. We have multiple organizations in our area that do something similar. And I want to be clear about what it is you guys are asking. We could bring that more. Bring back, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, it doesn't have to just be this.
Okay.
We
I
had,
just wanted to.
It doesn't have to be just these three.
No.
It could be, you bring together a group and something magical happens and you recommend a lot more than they're asking for.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Policy, so yeah, we can draft some policy.
In tab 12, you will find a draft policy for you to consider, while you are determining whether or not that as a board, you are comfortable with, providers, offering overnight opportunities to youth, in programs. At our last meeting, we did have one of our summer camps come to you and ask for an extension for a trip that they are interested in taking the youth on. It would be out of state, therefore also an overnight trip that they would be taking the youth on. We have consulted with Attorney Swain, who drafted the policy for us. We also submitted a statewide ask for CSC so that we can have an idea of what other trusts and CSCs across the state are doing. What I found is that many of our older CSCs that have been around for a while, think about Broward and Palm Beach, Miami, they are funding, they do allow. They don't do it very often, but they do and have allowed some of their providers to take youth on overnight opportunities, and most of the smaller and newer CSCs have not gotten to that point in their funding yet. What we would really like for this board to do is have a discussion so that you all can make a determination about how you feel about this. There are 3 organizations, I believe, that will be impacted by this decision. It is the organization that did come to the board meeting, which is Greater Duval. We also have the University of Florida. It's a CROC program that offers, it's not an out-of-state trip, it is overnight at the dorm. And I just aged myself by 30 dorm. I don't think they call me that anymore. I was saying,
What are they?
Residential, thank you, there you go. And so based on the decision that you make for this, the overnight opportunities, it could impact more than just Greater Duval. And so you all, I'm sure, have had an opportunity to review the draft policy that is in tab 12, and this is an opportunity for you all to discuss it here at this board meeting.
yes. Oh, I'm in favor of it. We heard from the program today about what they're talking about. I think it answers, as long as we've got the right controls in place and the follow the policies and it's part of the contract, I think we should move forward with the policy of the. It's not.
So I'm also okay with the policy with one minor change, which is in the insurance. It makes it sound like it's only vehicle, up to $1 million vehicle. I think it needs to include general and professional liability coverage up to the same limit. The reason I say that is lack of supervision is one of those areas where people get sued all the time when you're dealing with youth and they can get into trouble and then invariably the provider gets sued because they didn't adequately supervise the youth.
Madam Chair, our standard insurance already has that.
But for overnights,
Well, the
So-
reason this is specific to non-owned vehicle, which is a special type of coverage. If you're renting something or whatever, so it requires a higher coverage than our insurance might require specifically for non-owned.
but I know that a lot of these folks may not. I think it's important that their professional and general liability coverage includes supervision during overnight. It's a very different animal than having somebody during the day. I can tell you, somebody who ran these programs and also was sat on the board of an insurance company that insured professional and general liability. Failure to supervise is a huge issue, and it is particularly an issue in residential and overnight. So I would just make sure that when we authorize these, that the carrier that is insuring the provider, it understands that there's overnight programming. I saw a lot of those cases. So let me get, okay.
So I have a couple questions also, again, I'm also supportive of the trip, I think it's a great opportunity, I just have some liability issue questions. In terms of the first bullet point, all state requirements for any state they're gonna travel. Who's going to monitor that? That seems to be a lot. I can see certainly also Florida, because that's where they're coming from. So I don't know how that's feasible. Does anyone have any thought?
I thought that's Florida, like you gotta meet everything.
It says, for all states in which the travel will be taking place. That to me is very difficult for the providers to do. I can say we're certainly in Florida, that's where they're coming from, but what are the thoughts there?
Well, if they're going into another state, they better comply with the law of that state, and it's not really. I don't think the board wants to, the CTAC wants to be in the position of monitoring compliance on these terms. I think these are contractual obligations, and, we can, ask the question, have you checked this? But going beyond that, I don't know how far we can reasonably go.
Are we talking about level 1 and level 2 background screening for whatever is appropriate based on the population? Is that what we're talking about?
We're talking about whatever any state may require. In Florida, certainly. But the program that presented last month was going to take to Alabama or Georgia. So I don't know what those states require. So that is an inquiry that they have to make. And if they don't use our shorthand, if they have a different requirement. The goal of this was to make sure they meet that requirement. So if something happens in that state, they're complying with that law, because then it becomes a local issue to that state.
How does that work? And Cheryl, you might know the answer to this. It seems like I know occasionally foster parents were allowed to take foster kids that were in their care out of state to visit relatives or whatever, and how does that? I think there are ways in which that's done.
Well, I think the foster system is different. And the relationship between states in a foster program is different than what we're doing here. We aren't talking about a situation where the state of Florida is doing something that is at a state level. We're talking about a local government with the contractor. So I think they're two different situations.
So what do the schools do like for safety control? When, they do that Washington DC area. Is that, do they have to look at?
That's a good question.
That's the last thing Shane wanted to ask right now.
It's break up, I was wondering.
I did anything to that. I don't remember. Everyone said that. We had to sign parental releases and permission for them to go, but I don't remember like staff or the parents who were chaperoning having to do anything.
They have district of Columbia in the states along the way,
Right.
they have law enforcement with them on the buses. But I went on that trip myself and I didn't do it.
I know.
So I feel like I North Carolina, the district of Columbia.
The other question I had was about the, they have a working sequel that children harness. Should we think about having language in there that says, and they're going to be used for a trip?
We could, that's again, a legal requirement, they certainly put language into that effect, I mean, I just was. There again, it may be a bad assumption on my part, but this is all assuming they are following the law and. Children are supposed to be restrained.
Pardon me for being more than saying, I will spend people follow the law, but, I agree with you, it could be a little micromanaging, but, so you can get to the issue of what did you leave out, but.
My concern is a balancing between what we view as best practices that we want our contractors to do. And taking over so much control that then the trust becomes liable.
Right.
These people are not agents of the trust doing this. This is just the trust finding that these are the elements that we think are reasonable for overnight travel. And if you are going to vary from these, then you have to come to us and present that. But if, you know, the more control we actually exert over these, then you know, we have a situation where they may claim that somehow they're acting so agents.
Yes,
Okay, so I'm always gonna step on a landmine with Mr. Swain. Because I was gonna ask about this, each contractor responsible for safety training and youth protection training for their staff. And this is something we talked about as a meta program, that we would have, somebody, not necessarily the Child Advocacy Center, but somebody like that, do training for staffs for all of the programs that we fund, and safety training for kids for all the programs that we fund. So assuming that anyone who's traveling is in a program that we fund, wouldn't they have that meta training? And I just wanted to be a little more specific about what we mean by safety training and youth protection training, but maybe Mr. Swain would put this in the category of just being a little too controlling. But I think these are really important issues, really important.
The question is, have we defined what that training is and do we provide it? Because if we have not yet defined what that training is and we do not yet provide it, then this is simply telling them, you have to come to us and show that your people have been trained in barriers to youth abuse and that you've taken appropriate safety training for the event you're engaged in. So to me, it's one or the other. I would be quite happy if from a legal standpoint, if the board gave its imprimatur to, you know, a certain national program that's recognized in, you know, barriers to childhood abuse and to general safety, you know, and just like there is for mental health first aid. I don't know what those programs are. I haven't done research. My background is in Boy Scouts of America, and that is a morphing program. Every year they roll out changes to it, and it's quite comprehensive. I don't know what else there is, but if that would solve a number of problems. But in the absence of that, then this throws it back on the contractor to say, find something, administer it to your staff, and tell us that you've done it.
Well, I would love it if our contract with whoever the provider is requires them to let this program come in and have some time with their staff, have some time with their kids. And then that covers it. And then we, as the trust, pay that third party to do that training. And they do the quality control of it. And we have a trusted third party that we pay to do it. And I would like all of our programs to have that, not just the overnight.
program.
So that sounds like something should be in our contract.
That's what
I read the contract.
that's what I've brought up a couple of times, and I don't know if we've ever executed that, but I know we brought it up.
So what we implemented last year was a collaborative, offered multiple different types of training for our youth development organization. We just had our summer kickoff Thursday night and Saturday, where we informed them that were going to be multiple additional trainings for them to be involved in. The first training that we rolled out is CPR first aid. That's not only being offered to summer camp, but offered to all of our providers. We recently had a conversation with the Florida After School Network, who we are interested in becoming members, excuse me, because those trainings that they offer can then be offered for free to all of our providers. And so, yes, we are implementing that initiative to our providers as we speak. Specifically for safety, I will go back and look at the list of trainings that are being offered, as well as our local card center. So there are multiple trainings that we're looking at offering now. I don't mean to get in the weeds, but, or maybe I do. Some of these are mandatory, not mandatory, and internally we make that decision. But we will have some folks who may miss it, may not want it, may not, but we can take a look at our list and determine of those trainings, which ones should be mandatory, which ones are. For an example, CPR first aid is mandatory, it's in the contract. It is required. Our background screening, there are items within our contract that are required. So we do.
I think what this would be saying is that whatever those contractually required trainings is, when you take these kids on the trip, it's your responsibility as a provider to document the staff you're sending has had these mandatory trainings. And you have to keep the record of that, because you can't keep a record of their staff, right? So, I think it makes sense, and I think the more we get clarity on that, it'll get easier to monitor.
And we can add to the contracts of the programs that are gonna have overnight that requirement. With this being an option for your program, this is a requirement of safety training, make it a deliverable. We can amend contracts to ensure for those specific contract providers.
I just don't want them to have to pay for it. I think they should make time for it. That's what the contract should require. And I think this meta programming that I envision, we pay the third party to do it. It shouldn't come up with their time, just their time.
Does this still require, when someone's making a proposal to us, that they include that they will be doing it overnight, or is this just giving them free rein to do it overnight?
No, it is a part of their proposed program. So we were aware as soon as they submitted their proposal and began to address it.
Not just the ones that we know about, but in the
All
future, going
programs.
forward, will this give them carte blanche to travel? No.
I think they'd have to include it.
It has
I
to
would
be,
not be comfortable with that.
it has to be included.
It says it in policy, it's gotta be included.
It has to be included.
Yeah, that, the policy says that.
Yeah.
So Madam Chair, if I might, I think we heard a couple of, one is a request that the shoulder harness and seatbelt actually be worn.
Well, I'm okay.
I just had,
Yeah, I'm just convinced that we don't micromanage, but
I do still think we need to include the general professional liability, specifically covering overnights, because I'm telling you, I've seen it too often, with the lawsuits. Not just vehicle, but. And it can be up to policy limit. I'm not asking for an additional policy limit requirement, but I am asking that policy, whoever is their insurance carrier, understand that they're covering overnights.
Unless they put a rider on it that they don't cover overnights, they're gonna be stuck with it. speaking as insurance defense attorney, you've done coverage work.
They will. Yeah. But knowing how insurance companies work, they'd rather know it up front.
And a good broker or agent and an underwriter can find that out. They'd investigate the program.
And will this increase the cost to the provider?
Well, that's the whole reason why a big broker would do that, because then it goes back to the underwriters, and the underwriters would then use that information to quote. So,
Because these are board approved amounts, so if this is going to.
well, it may not immediately do that, I mean, but again, it's a full disclosure kind of thing, and one is best advised to be honest with one's insurance broker about the scope of what you do.
And if it's a midterm change in policy that will cost them more money, they can always come back to the board
Right.
and
And
request.
it's not gonna likely be a huge
Yeah,
amount.
it's not gonna be a huge amount. I mean, the goal in all this was that these would be pass-through costs. It would be part of what they know it up ahead of time, what they had to do. They figure out what that cost is and they build it into their proposal. So that they wouldn't be burdened by additional costs.
So Chris, you've got the last set of copy of the contract with plan to comply with the requirements shall be provided with a bid and contract documents. So you would, once we pass this, then amend those contract documents and bring that back. So I would move staff's recommendation, adding Maggie's. Including such liability as we can.
Second. Any further discussion, any citizen input? And then all in favor? At the end of our agenda. Any board member requests? Any requests? Dr. Snyder? Okay, Mr. Andrew? Dr. Hardy? All right, one. Good discussion.
Can you do me a favor? Can you see what the property appraiser thinks next year, if they have any idea what the value can increase, because that can make a difference in what we look at as far as ongoing as opposed to one thing.
I'll ask if they go to when they talk to the state, but that's how it's been. Bring that back. No, no.
The meeting, we will see each, one who decides to come to the data party in February. Yeah, in February, like there's 23rd.
Oh, I like bringing cake, but I don't know.
Yes.
I'm gonna-
Not sure.
Oh, it's Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
If